The Baltimore Ravens and Houston Texans face off in a major Christmas showdown. We talk about biggest matchups, key storylines, predictions for both teams, and so much more coming up on a crossover Thursday edition on Tuesday of Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a crossover Tuesday edition of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans. I'm Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Ravens. He is John Hickman of Locked On Texans, and we are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to our respective YouTube channels, and also in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe over there as well. We bring you 5 days a week of both Ravens and Texans coverage, news, analysis, updates, and so much more. Today's crossover Tuesday edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. John, this whole scheduling thing is throwing me off, man. I mean, we got these two teams playing on Saturday. Yeah. Texans lose to Kansas City. Baltimore beats Pittsburgh. Now they just flip-flop them and say, hey, you're going out there on Christmas Day, short turnaround again, and you're playing another super physical football game. This is the last stretch of it's rough. 3 games, 11 days. I mean, that's not easy for anybody. Houston and Baltimore both dealing with injuries, although I know, John, for Houston, the situation injury-wise is a lot worse than what Baltimore's dealing with.
Which makes playing 4 days later after Saturday even more frustrating. You know, this team was beat up a lot Saturday against the Kansas City Chiefs. Lost a starting receiver, Tank Dell. Loses Shaq Mason. Loses Jimmy Ward. Jalen Petry's already out. This team has been beat up, and for the most part, also Aziz is out due to suspension. So this team has been beat up a lot this year, and for the most part, they've been able to overcome it. But I just don't see how they'll be able to overcome it Wednesday after losing the players who they lost. And I think the biggest, of course, we'll talk about it in key storylines, but the biggest player that they lost is Tank Dell. There's nobody on this roster right now on a struggling offense. Excuse me. On a struggling offense that can replicate what Tank Dell can do. No one man. You may get a couple of guys to pitch in and be able to contribute the same, but there's no one man on this offense from what we've been able to see be able to replicate what Tank Dell has been able to do. The only player that I can think of with the opportunity that he should be able to get now is John Mechie. But he was out Saturday. Full go on Monday. So hopefully Houston will get their things together. John Mechie is, for whatever reason, healthy now. I was kind of shocked he missed Saturday's game. But hopefully he'll be able to go out there and contribute for the Houston Texans offense. But right now, the biggest matchup, when we look at both teams coming off a turnaround, it has to be the offense versus the defense. I mean, this is a banged-up offense right now. And Baltimore, stop me if I'm wrong, Baltimore has been able to kind of string it together a little bit as of late, especially with a secondary that started off this year struggling, and now they've come along a little bit more. So, what's up with the defense, and would that be the biggest matchup for the Houston Texans? Should we be worried?
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore's defense has been really good over the course of the last month or so, and started with a closed door open forum meeting after the Ravens beat the Bengals, and they were giving up touchdown after touchdown to Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. And really ever since then, they've gotten their act together. The pass defense has been great. They made some tough decisions, like benching their $70 million man and Marcus Williams in favor of Ardarius Washington, who made one of the plays of the game for the Ravens against Pittsburgh on Saturday. It's just a matter of guys wanting to play. And that's kind of what Marlon Humphrey was talking about a couple of weeks ago when he was asked about the defensive turnaround. He said, look, in that meeting, we talked about how the message was, if you want to play and you want to contribute, you're going to be out on that field. If you don't, we have a spot for you on the bench. And that is what this Ravens defense has done. They've moved Kyle Hamilton back into a more traditional safety role on the back end, not having him up towards the line as much. That has helped Baltimore's defense. And with guys like Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins, their rookie corner, who's playing really well, and obviously Hamilton and Ardarius Washington. You look at Houston, who no longer has Stephon Diggs. Now they're down Tank Dell as well. That's tough. Nico Collins is a stud. Like he's incredible, one of the best wide receivers in this league, but he can't do it by himself. And obviously we'll get into the wide receiver swap, essentially the Ravens and the Texans had on Monday with Deontay Johnson. But I think, to me, this defense has been one of the biggest storylines for the Ravens just because of the turnaround. The run defense was always good. They're the top rush defense in the league. The guys on the defensive line have been great. Nnamdi Madubuike, Travis Jones, and Afe Owe, Kyle Van Noy's a double-digit sack man after coming off his couch last year for Baltimore. They're getting contributions from a lot of guys. But on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's interesting for Baltimore too, John, because what you have is an MVP type player in Lamar Jackson, who is in that conversation, and DeMeco Ryans, obviously head coach of the Houston Texans,
gave him some love.
Really nice things to say. Yeah, nice things to say. And obviously the discourse has been very toxic. Lamar actually broke his silence about the toxicity of the MVP conversation between him and Josh Allen. But DeMeco, again, he propped Lamar Jackson up. He said he definitely jumps off the tape as the best player I've seen this year. Talk about MVP. He's definitely the MVP in my mind. And Lamar's been great. 40 total touchdowns. He's broken his single season passing record. He's shown his decision making has gone up even more than we saw last season. This is the best Lamar that we have ever seen. And after 2023, we were wondering, when was that conversation going to be had again? We didn't even have to wait a year to have that. So for Lamar, he has a great cast of weapons around him. Obviously, bringing in Derrick Henry has really helped this offense. I think the narrative people are running with now is that, oh, Derrick Henry is the best player on this offense and he makes Lamar better. It's the other way around. Like, Henry's awesome. Hall of Fame, future Hall of Fame. I know he's had some moments against that Houston defense, and I'm sure a lot of Texans fans will But to me, it's like, look, both players are awesome, and people are saying, oh, you take Lamar off the Ravens, and the Ravens are still an 8-win team with Derrick Henry. And I'm just like, look, Derrick Henry's sick. He's an amazing player. Lamar makes that offense go. We've seen it this season. And I think, to me, Lamar's evolution has been an incredible part of how the Ravens have been so successful this year.
Absolutely. I think they complement each other so great. So well. They complement each other so well. And the arrival of Derrick Henry, I mean, you really have to account for him still. I mean, he's had games this year where you can make a case, hey, if Derrick Henry isn't as hot as he is running the ball, this is a different Baltimore offense. But the thing about Lamar is Lamar has never had a true number one receiver. This year, Zay Flowers has done a very good job of being that team's number one receiver for Baltimore. But when I look at Derrick Henry and his arrival, I think him being so great at what he does opens up opportunities for a speedy receiver in Zay Flowers. Because a lot of times teams still, when you look at the hierarchy on that offense, where does Zay Flowers rank? At least coming into the season, at least for the most part of this season. Maybe now he may be a little bit higher, but you have to account for Lamar, whether that's him running the ball or throwing the ball. Now with Derrick Henry, those guys are 1-1-A. Traditionally with this offense, it's been the tight ends, and so Zay Flowers being the third, fourth, fifth option, he's done a very good job in his role. And I do think Houston will have a tough matchup against that offense. They have Danielle Hunter here in Houston, Will Anderson here in Houston. So those two guys have played great on the edge, double-digit sack guys together. They both missed. Will Anderson has missed some time. So the running aspect of Lamar, I'm not necessarily as worried about. I know he's going to break off a couple here and there, but he's gotten so much better as a passer. And also now considering no Jimmy Ward for the Houston Texans, no Jalen Petrie for the Houston Texans, no Aziz for the Houston Texans, stud rookie cornerback, Kamari Lassiter, he's not going to have to play that nickel, which leaves a Jeff Okuda, who I don't even think has played in 80 snaps this year for Houston Texans. Don't think he's played in over 100 snaps this year. He's rusty, and he is not the greatest option for outside corner right now. And so I think Rashad Bateman, who, by the way, has been playing some good football for that offense, I think that's where the disadvantage is. Am I necessarily worried about the Texas defensive front not having a good game? No, I think that they'll have a good game. Tim Settle's also a guy I think Ravens fans need to look out for. Olafide is up and down with his injury. We don't know if he's going to play. I think he was a DNP Monday. But it's Lamar attacking defenses vertically hasn't been a conversation that has been consistent throughout his career. This is one of those years where career highs and almost everything, you have to be worried about that. And with a banged-up secondary, this is an opportunity for the Ravens to really attack this team and hurt the Houston Texans downfield.
Yeah, and I think Baltimore probably will try to push the ball down the field, but Lamar, he'll try to take some stuff that is given to him. And there's been some conversation here in Baltimore about Lamar over the course of the year, maybe not taking open rushing lanes when they're provided to him, instead letting routes develop instead. After the Ravens game against Philadelphia, Lamar Jackson told reporters that his mom cussed him out for not taking those rushing lanes, and Lamar Jackson is 2-0. The Ravens are 2-0 since his mom cussed him out. Sometimes that's what you need, a little love and a little. You get an opportunity, I think, to kind of reset during the bye week, and I think that's exactly what Baltimore did, and I think we're seeing an even different Lamar Jackson here. I expect that to happen against the Texans as well. But coming up in the second part of the show, we talked about the Ravens. We will flip the field, talk about the Texans a little more, and how the Ravens and Texans match up. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot to get into on this crossover Thursday, on Tuesday, of both Locked On Ravens and confused. Locked On Texans. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. Man, FanDuel has so many great things going on over there. The NFL playoffs, they're almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. And you have so many ways on FanDuel to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It really is thrilling. And not only can you bet on who will actually win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. Back here on Locked On Ravens, it's Locked On Texans. It's Kevin Ostreicher, and it's John Hickman talking with you about a Christmas Day matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans.
Can it be a Christmas Day miracle? Can the Houston Texans? I think they've done enough for the Houston Texans to be considered to get off of Santa's naughty list. I mean, they've been banged up and hit from every which way in terms of losing players. And so hopefully Santa can come through for him, because if he's checking their list twice, please see the Houston Texans and give them a gift of a win this Wednesday.
Man, well, right now the Ravens are 5.5-point favorites over on FanDuel, our friends over at FanDuel. So, could be a blowout, could be a close game. We don't know how it's going to go. But, John, I think one of the bigger storylines, and I'm really intrigued to kind of hear where you are about the Texans offense right now at this point in the year, because CJ Stroud, I know a lot of expectations for him coming into the year after his phenomenal rookie season. The Texans, they bring in Stephon Diggs to pair with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. Of course, that receiver room has fallen apart due to injury, but I know there's been a lot of conversation about CJ this season and his performance. They bring in Joe Mixon, who for the most part has been incredible, is a new addition to that offense. But in your mind, for Houston and the biggest storyline on the offensive side of the ball, is it CJ Stroud, or is it more so how depleted this wide receiver room has become?
Depends on if we're talking about for the season. But we're doing a crossover right now, so I know you're talking about the Wednesday matchup. It's 100% the wide receiver room. No Diggs. They knew that going into Saturday. They leave Saturday and speedy recovery to Tank Dell, losing Tank Dell, dislocated knee, torn ACL, all on one play. Now you're looking at a Houston Texan team that I think has been desperate for a couple of weeks, and a lot of times they've been able to pull through their desperation and get a win. This team, they've been resilient all year. If you look at the amount of losses, Nico Collins was out for 5 games, and they have to survive through that. The issue is now you're going through the period of the schedule. You've already solidified your playoff spot. Now you're going to have to bounce back and work with what you have going into the playoffs. And Tank Dell is a player, again, like I said, I don't know if there is a player that can replicate what Tank Dell has been able to be for this Houston Texan offense. More so because in CJ, we saw the crying on national TV, and I don't have no problem with that. That's his boy. Said that's a brother, best friend. Those two chemistry is better than any other receiver that's available for the Houston Texans, not named Nico Collins. And so the biggest storyline right now for Houston is the depleted wide receiver room. And I don't think it'll be this Wednesday against his former team whenever Deontay Johnson does play, who Houston claimed on waivers. What will he be able to do for this offense? I don't think he'll play Wednesday. Too fast of a turnaround. I think we'll see him against the Tennessee Titans right before the Houston Texans gear up for the playoffs. But this depleted wide receiver room is something that I don't think that they'll be able to overcome. Also, considering Dalton Schultz and that tight end room has been, for the most part, lackluster, close to abysmal.
Yeah, and I think the other big part of this, speaking of wide receivers, you mentioned Deontay Johnson. I think that's a huge storyline as these two teams face off in just 24 hours now.
What can he tell us about you guys?
Yeah. I was going to say, well, based off of his time in Baltimore, and I'll tell you, it's good luck. And the reason I say that is because Deontay really didn't do much of anything in Baltimore. I think Jeremy Fowler, honestly, John, put it best. He lit millions in flames during his tenure with the Ravens. He had 1 catch for 5 yards on 5 targets, and it was a problem where, he comes in, he says all the right things, and he's like, look, I'll play any role. I'm ready to go to work. Let's do this. But then all this stuff comes out about him and being distraught after wins because of his role, and him obviously refusing to go in the game against Philadelphia was the big breaking point in this situation. And look, John, I don't have a problem with a guy being upset about how they're being used, or a problem about their role, or, they have an issue with how their team is utilizing them. That's fine to me. I don't think the Ravens utilized him great, if we're being honest. But when you refuse to go in the game, you essentially quit on your team. That it's a whole different situation. That's never okay, regardless of most any situation. And I think with the Devondre Campbell situation happening in San Francisco, just a few days after that, and the response to that, I honestly feel like Baltimore might have tried to keep him if the Devondre Campbell situation didn't happen, because there is a reality, John, now that Deontay Johnson is on the Texans. If the Ravens falter and they fall to a wild card spot, I have them winning the division, the AFC North right now. If the Ravens playoff start is today, these two teams will be facing off in round 1.
Right.
And so Deontay Johnson has the potential to face off against his former team. The Ravens, they understood that was probably a risk. Talent-wise, on field, I think he's a good player. He can separate very well, one of the best separators in the league. I think he can give you a lot if the other aspect off the field doesn't hinder it. But he's had issues in Pittsburgh. He had issues in Carolina, which was one of the reasons why he was traded for Soto, is because Carolina wanted him off the roster. Baltimore brought him in thinking that things could maybe change, and Baltimore's locker room culture is really strong, but it didn't work. So if Houston can find a way to turn that around, I think he's a great player on the field. But it's just a matter of how it happens.
I do want to say this briefly. I was really shocked in the sense that Houston signed him. This is a locker room that don't play that. There's no nonsense. If you don't want to, if you don't want to go on the field, this ain't the locker room. And I think all 32 teams in the NFL are like this. But obviously, when you look at a playoff team, this ain't the locker room to do that. So I was kind of shocked a little bit, but that shows you how much of a desperation mode this team is in right now. But I'll say this, for the Houston Texans that traded the number 23 overall pick, traded back, eventually took Kamari Lassiter, and they ended up signing Stephon Diggs. The number 23 overall pick ended up being Brian Thomas Jr. Boy, would the Houston Texans love to have him right now. So I say that to say this. Both the Texans and Johnson are in a very good spot right now, because I think this is an opportunity for both sides to figure out, is this a player we should even consider bringing back for training camp next year to make sure that we have a full wide receiver room? And for Deontay Johnson, I need to show one of 32 teams that I can still play football and play it at a high level. So I think this is a win-win situation for both sides. And hopefully it ends up being a major win for the Houston Texans to where, hey, you know what, Johnson, you gave us a little bit, you got a little juice left. At the very least, we're going to give you a 1-year deal. We want to bring you back for training camp. Low risk, high reward. Come on in, come on back. And that's why I think it's important that Houston brought him in. The playoffs, I don't really think it's going to matter too much. I think this is a one-and-done team. But you got to figure out what you have on your roster now for next year.
Yeah, and sometimes that is what it is. The need was apparent for Houston. They are desperate for a wide receiver. It's now come out that one other team placed a claim for Deontay Johnson. The Texans got him. It was the Los Angeles Chargers. They were the only other team to put in a claim for Deontay. So the Texans get him. The Chargers don't. But this was a wide receiver swap, John, because not only did Deontay Johnson go to the Houston Texans, Steven Sims Jr. went to the Ravens on waivers. So it's kind of like a trade, right? The Ravens, they acquire Steven Sims.
A lot in common right now with these two teams.
Yeah, they acquired Deontay Johnson. So from a Ravens perspective, what can you tell Baltimore about Steven Sims, who obviously had a big play against Baltimore in the divisional round last year?
Yeah, good return, man. That's it. Just a good return, man. You look at your wide receiver room right now. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman. I think Wallace has been.
Yeah, they got Nelson Aguilar in there.
Nelson Aguilar. So if Nelson Aguilar is your third receiver, Steven Sims would be your fifth in terms of receiver-wise. But he's a good special teamer, and he's a good return man. There's nothing more, nothing less. I don't have anything else for you. I'm sorry.
Wait, no, it's fine because with the Ravens, they've had some returner issues this season. They've tried Tylan Wallace out, hasn't really worked as well as they've thought. They brought in Desmond King, who obviously Texans fans are very familiar with, and he had 2 fumbles in that Pittsburgh game. Now, luckily, Baltimore was able to get them both back, but John Harbaugh did say that he's going to be the return guy moving forward. But having Steven Sims is probably just an insurance option. If Desmond King doesn't work out, you can bring in Steven Sims and have him return, and that will be that. So you get Deontay Johnson out in Houston. Steven Sims comes to Baltimore. Little post-deadline swap for both of these teams. And coming up, we'll be talking about some keys to victory for both sides, talking about what the Texans need to do if they want to beat the Ravens, and what the Ravens need to do if they want to beat the Texans. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot coming your way on Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans. First, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks, and today's episode is sponsored by PrizePicks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. PrizePicks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can out up to 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Picksmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks means you to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. So this week, I'm looking at Jared Goff, more than 230 passing yards. Saquon Barkley for more than 1 touchdown. It's quick, simple, and so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game. And this show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Now, Rocket Money, maybe they've helped you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice. That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and have saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Now, For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't even using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Locked On Texans. This is a Christmas Eve crossover for a Christmas Day matchup between the Ravens and the Texans. Of course, want to thank everybody for making both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans a part of your day and your first listen each and every day. And remind you that this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. John, let's move into some keys to victory for both of these teams here. I think that there are ways that both teams could pull this one out, ways that they can lose this game. I'll start on the Ravens side of things as they are traveling to Houston. This is actually, for those that don't know, the second straight year Baltimore is traveling. They are playing away on Christmas Day. The Ravens did it last year against San Francisco. That game went pretty well for them. And Lamar Jackson wrapped up the MVP there. Lamar has a chance to wrap up the MVP in Houston against the Texans this time around. But number one, I think Baltimore has to continue their strong play from Pittsburgh, particularly in the penalty department. The Ravens going into their game against Pittsburgh, John, they were ranked last in nearly every statistical major penalty category there was. Like every single one. Penalties against, you had yards, net penalties. It was bad. The Ravens against Pittsburgh, just 2 penalties for 10 yards. That is the type of football you need to play. Mistake-free, or at least as close to it as you can get football, because there have been too many times this season where the Ravens will have a nice 8-yard run from Derrick Henry on first down. And then all of a sudden, there's Holden, Ronnie Stanley, 10 yards, a 2nd and 2 turns into a 1st and 20, and that just derails drives. So getting out of your own way if you're the Ravens. Don't let Houston make this game all sloppy and try to make it their way. Get ahead and do your thing while also making sure that you're not getting in your own way while doing that. Second part of this, I would definitely say put pressure on CJ Stroud, and for the Texans offensive line, which has dealt with injuries, is still dealing with injuries and hasn't performed up to most expectations this season. Guys like Travis Jones, Nnamdi Madubuike, Odafe Owe. I think if those guys can put pressure on CJ Stroud, turn up that internal clock, any quarterback, I don't care how good you are, any quarterback that has that clock sped up, certainly CJ can make plays when that happens. I'm not saying he can't, but you don't want CJ just sitting back there in the pocket for 4 or 5 seconds, going through his reads and not feeling any heat. You got to turn up the pressure on CJ. I'd expect Baltimore to maybe use Roquan Smith up at the line. Maybe they'll flirt with Kyle Hamilton up there. They like using Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins on those corner blitzes. I think that's a big way for Baltimore to win this game. And finally, my third key to victory for Baltimore is I just think getting the tight ends involved. And Mark Andrews has been awesome. Isaiah Likely has been awesome. The Texans got back Christian Harris, who's a heck of a linebacker, absolute stud of a player. But I feel like the Texans are going to miss Jalen Petrie in this game. This is a guy that you would be, okay, this is your tight end stopper. Go out there, versatile player, can play all over the field. I feel like they're going to miss him. And I feel like for the tight ends, we know about Zay Flowers as a wideout. We know about Rashad Bateman as a wideout as well. And actually, for Baltimore's injury situation, you still have a couple of guys who you would think maybe would have been practicing by now, but they're actually not. Now, again, this is a short week. I think both teams are being pretty conservative with their guys and not pushing anybody too far. But Baltimore's Monday injury report, Nelson Aguilar, Jalen Armour-Davis, Daniel Falele, Zay Flowers, Justice Hill, and Trey White all did not practice. So you essentially have one more practice day today to maybe get that status up. Who knows? But out of these guys, the ones that I don't expect to play, I don't think Nelson Aguilar or Justice Hill will clear in time to play. Justice Hill's concussion was nasty on Saturday. I'm not sure about Zay Flowers. I'm not sure about Trey White. I would probably say both those guys play. But to me, I feel like if the Ravens can get Mark Andrews involved, Isaiah Likely involved, I feel like that's a way that the Ravens can exploit this Houston defense and use the short passing game too. You got Will Anderson, you got Danielle Hunter, you got a good defensive line. If they're getting pressure on you, the best way to combat, even if the Texans want to blitz Lamar, It's about getting the ball out quickly. So I feel like that's, for me, keys to victory for Baltimore. What about you, John? What are some keys to victory for the Texans?
I'm actually going to steal one of yours. And we know Tank Dell is down, struggling offense. Houston extended Dalton Schultz in the offseason. He's been a disappointment so far to this part of the season. Not nearly the season he had last year, but, we talk about the wide receiver room and that depth chart in that area of the team being banged up. The fact is, Dalton Schultz, your $11 million a year man, has to be able to produce for this offense. There's no way around it. CJ needs him. It's been frustrating a lot this year with Dalton Schultz, and I'm going to be fair to him. You didn't pay him $11 million to block as much as he has. But Dalton has routinely on tape shown a lackadaisical effort on the field. And it's been frustrating to watch. So he needs to get involved. Nobody talks about Brevin Jordan and his injury and how much that has impacted this offense in a lot of different ways. When you lose a Swiss Army knife that can do different things, it hurts an offense. And Dalton Schultz, he needs to step up. Irv Smith has played some good football for the Houston Texans in his limited role. Number 2, I'm going to read off some numbers to you. 28, 35, 41, 30, 41, 35, 30, 35, 34. You want to know what that is? Points the Ravens have scored in their wins.
Yeah.
The Houston Texans cannot afford for this game to get away from them fast. They don't have the offense to keep up. Time and time again, we've seen and they've shown us to not be able to, was it 5 or 6 weeks in a row? No second half points, no second half touchdown. They cannot keep up with this offense. If this game gets out of hand early, then I think it'll be a blowout. Don't want to put a score prediction on it, but if Baltimore leaves out their first quarter and the game is 13-0, 14-0, or something along those lines, it's going to be a blowout. It's going to be an ugly Christmas day. Will not be a Christmas miracle. So they got to make sure that they're able to get off the field when they can get off the field. Not necessarily sure how good of a team Baltimore is on third downs right now, but whenever Houston can create that pressure or get them to play a little bit behind the sticks or on long downs to convert, get off the field. And lastly, I think this is for both teams, Kevin. Do not get caught up in Beyonce.
Hey, I'm with that. And if you heard what Lamar said on Monday, he said he's going to be watching. He said, sorry, John Harbaugh, I'm watching. I'm with you, though. I'm with you on that.
No, don't get caught up, man. But I mean, it's what I want to say.
Do you remember Evan McPherson at the halftime show with Cincinnati? He watched the halftime show from the field. The Bengals lost the Super Bowl, and he got all types of hate for it. Like,
don't get caught up in Beyonce. No, seriously. That's my 3 keys to victory. But Houston got to go out there and put it all together. I am worried about the secondary. I really am. And I'm really worried about Bateman having a big day for you guys. He's averaging 19, 18 yards per catch. Man. He's been the downfield target whenever Lamar needs to stretch the field. Houston has Derek Stingley, who I think they need to put on him, and Kalen Bullock, who I think right now should be in serious consideration for defensive rookie of the year. But I'm a little bit worried about Bateman because I don't think he's a Beyonce fan.
He's going to be locked in at halftime. No, Bateman's a stud. He's awesome. And to answer your question, Baltimore is 23rd in the league on defense and third down this year. So not a great number.
How are they offensive third
Offensively,
down?
they're third. They're good on third down.
So for the Texans defense,
right? Okay,
when they can get a shot to get off the field, do that. Because Baltimore, just like Kansas City, conversion. And you see a 10-play drive. And by the 8th play, the defense is a little worn out. Yeah. And that's consistently. So by the 3rd quarter, by the 4th quarter, those plays that this team has routinely been able to make, you got these offenses being able to control the clock and control the ball. Now they're gassed a little bit. And Lamar Jackson is the wrong quarterback to be gassed against.
No, you're not going to have a good time if you're gassed against Lamar Jackson. I think this is going to be a good game. Christmas Day matchup between the Houston Texans and the Baltimore Ravens. That's all we have to hear today on this crossover Thursday on Tuesday of Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans. It's actually really fun saying that. But I appreciate you, John, for hopping on, providing some Texans insight. I try to do my best to provide the Ravens insight, and we'll, of course, be back here tomorrow on our respective shows, Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans, breaking down everything you need to know about this matchup and more. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Have a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and we'll see you back here soon on both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Texans.